How's it going, everybody? So back again today with a analysis video. I've been away for a little bit, been busy doing different things. Kind of revamped my chess slightly a little bit in the process in terms of especially like opening play and different things. But yeah, I played a game earlier this week on chess.com. It was a 30-minute rapid game. At the time, you see down here, I had a rating of 1701. My opponent was 1815, and yeah, it was an instructive game that I definitely thought was worth sharing some instructive points, especially for different points at which people like at our level, club players again. You make moves that definitely make sense, and they're the same things grandmasters would play or whatever. But then there are other times where there's instructive shortcomings. So yeah, we had it was sort of a little bit of everything in this game, but definitely instructive moments. So to start off, this is one of the changes that I've kind of revamped in my chess. I've gotten away from playing the London. I know for the longest time, for a while there, whenever I had white, I was showing you guys London games because that's just sort of what I was playing. But it's kind of been suggested to me that to kind of up my game a little bit, try to learn some different sort of theoretical ways of going at it. And that's what I've tried to do. I've went back to what I used to play, which was e4. And in this game, my opponent played the French, which I've been playing a lot as black recently, so some familiarity. So I went into it, and with the white pieces, I'm really trying to kind of button down the Tarrasch a bit. There's different elements of it that I like. It just sort of feels interesting. I've been studying, a good amount of Karpov's games recently, and especially early on, he liked to play the Tarrasch. So, yeah, some instructive things. I definitely don't feel like I'm an expert on it or anything, but yeah, sometimes I'm trying to refine a bit. So the opponent went with knight f6, played e5. They went back. I played f4. And I wasn't quite sure, of the theoretical lines here. I knew that these were ideas in the French, but I wasn't quite so sure with the Tarrasch. I'm more familiar with similar lines with the classical, with white here, where white has their knight on c3, and I know these ideas of f4 happen. But I wasn't quite sure if this was theory in the Tarrasch too. I guess it is, but yeah, it is what it is. Black plays their classic c5 break. White reinforces with c3, knight c6, knight d to f3. The knight, hopping from d2 to f3, and the knight sort of crisscrossing as they kind of do in the Tarrasch oftentimes. Black brings their queen out to b6, exerting more pressure on d4 and on b2 as well. The knight comes to e2. A5, and this was a moment where a lot of my London play. Again, I don't know this theory at this point, but a lot of my London play kind of influenced my thinking here. And I played Queen B3, which turns out not a bad move, but not best. I was basically just trying to neutralize Black's queen, take away their pressure on the b pawn, try to free up my light squared bishop, all those kind of things. But turns out probably best here was playing g3, looking to put the bishop on g2 and to castle kingside. Again, not being familiar with the theory, this just looked kind of weakening, especially with the queen on the what is that, the a7 g1 diagonal. Yeah, but yeah, it turns out that this was probably best. Also playable for sure here was rook b1, with the bishop trying to get developed and not have to worry about the b pawn. But yeah, so I went with queen b3. Wasn't the worst, but gave us this end game, which I definitely think has some instructive moments for sure. So so we get knight g3, and at this point, one more thing I guess I would say is um, not feeling so comfortable in this line. You know, playing a somewhat higher rated opponent, feeling like they probably know more about it than I do. I was somewhat relieved to get the queens off the board because I felt like my minor pieces here were kind of clogged up. My king was far away from castling. So I was okay with getting the queens off the board. So knight g3, there's a trade on d4. I take with the knights, and they take back. And so we get this structure. They play g6, bishop d3. We get a few moves here that all sort of make sense, don't really merit a whole lot of commentary. We both challenge the c-file. There's a capture, trade of rooks. Bishop b4 check. Black tries to develop their bishop. So in retrospect, I'm not really sure why this bishop, let me go back here. I'm not really sure why this pawn came to g6 for black. Maybe they were thinking of fianchettoing, but you know, maybe it just turns out to be a wasted move. And furthermore, a theme you'll see here, the black pawns are all on light squares, which can definitely be problematic for black with their light squared bishop, and we'll see more about that in a bit. But yeah, the dark squared bishop comes out. I defend the king, and here black should have probably played something like bishop e7, and the game would have continued. But they made what turns out to be a bit of an inaccuracy, which is they took on d2, which, yeah, probably best to think of this as an inaccuracy because it's not obviously losing for black or anything like that, but it does allow me to bring my king to where it wants to go. And whereas before the game was pretty even, maybe black had the slightest of an advantage. At this point, it's now white who's the one who's pressing. You know, small advantage, but definitely an advantage. White's pieces are definitely better here, especially white's bishop. So yeah, when black played bishop takes d2, and I get to play this move king takes d2, I really liked my position, and I was happy to see after the game that the engine definitely agreed. Again, white is not winning or anything, but white is definitely for choice here. So black plays king e7, logical. I bring my king to the file. Black does the same, very logical. And here, I decided that, you know, probably not going to be able to do a whole lot with the rooks in this kind of situation. I mean, I thought about rook c3. You know, maybe I can, you know, improve my king after there's a trade there. But sort of getting through all of the possible complications there, I decided to go with rook takes c8, with the idea that trading the rooks like this is probably, you know, a really good idea for white. Turns out the computer thinks this is best. And again, the rationale is that it just brings one of black's pieces farther out of play and improves the comparative quality of white's pieces over black's pieces, especially again in this position, black's light squared bishop compared to white's light squared bishop. So they take with the knight, and then I played h4, possibly, you know, trying to play h5 maybe, but also just putting my pawns on dark squares opposite color to my bishop, and just reinforcing that, you know, black's pawns are it's gonna be hard for them to come off of these light squares. So black plays h5, play knight e2, trying to reroute the knights, get a little bit, you know, more activity for it, somewhere else to go. And then we see this move show up on the board, b5. So this might look rather innocuous, but it turns out this is a mistake. Like this is a pretty surprising mistake, and I think a really instructive point for people like at our level, right? Because you see a move like this, and it's not like it's blowing a piece or anything like that. It's not just obviously losing material or something, but the point is that, black is just putting another pawn on light squares. So I thought this had to be great for me. I can play a move like a3, infiltrate on the queen side, and I'm just faster at putting pressure on black's position before black's able to do anything to me. And at this point, the engine gives this position about +3 for white, and I think that fact is really worth kind of dwelling on at this point. Here's a position, even material, but because of the relative quality of white's pieces compared to black's pieces, especially the light squared bishop that black has compared to white's light squared bishop, and the fact that white is so close to infiltrating against black's queen side and creating pressure there, which black is only going to be able to defend against for the rest of the game, it really speaks to why positionally this is just so much better for white. So yeah, I think a really instructive point, sort of look at this, try to appreciate for yourself why is this so good for white. So I went ahead and played a3 here, but it turns out that, and again, the idea of a3 was to just lock down the pawns on light squares, and it's a totally fine move. But there was actually slightly better continuation here. Computer suggests king c3 with the idea of just getting in here with your pieces. I read something recently about endgames, so I've really been trying to focus on my endgame recently. I read something, Jacob Aagaard, one of his books, I'm probably not pronouncing his name correctly there, but anybody who's sort of looked at chess books, Jacob Aagaard is a name that you see a lot of. But in this particular book, he was talking about improving your pieces in the endgame and sort of which pieces to improve. And he gave an order of you should improve your queen first, your rooks, and then surprisingly to me, your king. So if you have an end game where it's like queens and just like a queen and a king or something like that, or if you have an end game where it's a rook and a king or something, improve the rook or improve the queen before improving your king. But he also gives a suggestion: improve your king before you improve your minor pieces, and that's not something that intuitively made sense to me before I read that. But this is a great example of it. The engine wants you to play king c3 here just immediately and get your king into the position, which is to say improve your king and sort of leave your minor pieces or your pawns sort of where they're at. And a sample line would be something like knight a7, king before the knight comes in with a check, king c5, and look at white's king. White is going to be able to just create so much pressure here. Black is doing nothing but defending for the rest of the game. I think white is like something like +4 here or something. And again, another point that it's a good position to look at to try to appreciate from a positional perspective why white is so much better, even though material is even. Okay, so instead of that, I played this slightly inferior move a3, but it's still totally reasonable. It makes a whole lot of sense. Again, locking down the pawns on light squares. Black came in with knight b6, and then I infiltrated with king c3. They played knight c4, and it turns out that this is a good place to pause your video and try to guess what the best move for white in this position is. All right, so best move for white, I think, kind of hinges around maybe what should be obvious in this position. But this is an example where I just overcomplicated things and didn't do the obvious thing. So the obvious move here is bishop takes c4. And it turns out that white is going to want to capture with the b pawn because, yeah, just going the other way, this way, white just gets too much complication, being able to push their d pawn, bring their knight to d4, bring their king to b3 or b4, apply pressure to b3. Sorry. So let me just put this on the board. So white is able to, after d takes c4, white is able to play d5, knight d4, which pressurizes b5, bring their king to b4, adding more pressure to b4. So yeah, long story short, black wants to take here. But even then, white's got this idea of pressurizing a4. This is a recurrent, a really important fact about this position. White wants to get at the a4 pawn. That's their target. And this is something that underscores why the moves that I actually played in the game was so comparatively bad. It wasn't a losing move, but it just took most of the advantage that I had in the position away. And that was, I tried to kick the knight with b3. My thinking was, hey, I get to get my king over to b3, and I can further just pressurize by coming to b4. Yeah, I'm not really sure. But yeah, it was the move that was on the board. So they take, the king goes back, and we play several moves here that are pretty logical, make a lot of sense. I finally did take, but again, the point here is that I don't have a target on a4, at least a target that I can quickly get my king and knight to latch onto before black's king can come in and help. Where in the variation, well, it's not going to happen here, but black's king, I just gave black's king too many tempi here, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to get into the position and try to help to defend. So a4, king b6, knight c3, bishop e8. Black doesn't have a lot to do, and I was kind of getting in time trouble at this point. I was looking around for a lot of ideas, but I felt under the gun. Again, playing a higher rated opponent, turns out I have a winning position. I felt like I had a winning position, and what I would say again is just go ahead and pause the video and try to find the best continuation for whites. This is a really instructive point. I think along with the last point about bishop takes c4, this might actually be maybe the most instructive point of the game, if not one of the top ones. So yeah, go ahead and pause the video and sort of see how you would continue. So yeah, this is something that I'm trying to get much better in terms of my endgame technique, is seeing ideas like this one. And the idea is f5. So yeah, this move is just pushing, continuing to push and press white's advantage. So let's look at the obvious moves. G takes f5. The idea is knight to e2. The bishop moves because white just doesn't have a whole lot better to do. The knight comes in, and white, it is just winning here. White is going to come and round up the h5 pawn, is going to press their h pawn, and yeah, what is black doing here? Black's, probably has to move their f7 pawn in order to get their bishop over, but is sacrificing a pawn there, giving another strong passed pawn. Yeah, this is just a really bad situation for black. And if we look at the other capture, e takes f5, then we have this idea, knight takes d5. Turns out the engine wants to play the king to b7. We get a move like a5, and again, white's got, this passed d pawn. Essentially, white's two pawns are corralling black's four pawns, especially for the time being. White is going to take on c4. The a pawn is a decoy for the black king, just pulling it further away from the action, and probably white is going to end up trading their d pawn for black's bishop, take the rest of black's kingside pawns, and queen their e pawn, or at least take the f7 black pawn and queen the e5 pawn. So yeah, again, another totally winning position. And finally, if black doesn't do anything, white is going to play um, f6 and look for some kind of situation to possibly sacrifice on e6 or g6, and push the f pawn home. So yeah, this is a totally winning situation that, being in time trouble, I did not see. But again, I'm trying to get better at sort of seeing ideas like this. Yeah, so looking around at this time trouble, I was like, hey, I'm playing a higher rated opponent, not really seeing anything else. I went in for knight b5, which essentially throws away my advantage. It just brings it into a drawn position. So we get this move, king c7, and here's a case where, again, time pressure, and again, just kind of being flippant. A good continuation would have been something like king c3, king b7, king b4, king b6. Black has the opposition, but white takes the opposition back. We get a drawn ending. But you got to sort of be precise like that. You've got to see kind of what tricks white has, and or sorry, in this case, you got to be see what kind of tricks black has, and you can't be just overly careless, as I was when I played g3. So this is just a great example of the kind of mistakes people at our level make. Endgame technique is not where it should be, and you just are like, hey, this can't be harmful or anything, but hey, it turns out black is totally winning here. King b6, black takes the opposition. King a4, I don't know, I'm trying to hang on for something. c3, black's threatening the queen. I've got to go back and stop that. And then it turns out black should have, so when this move happened on the board, I was like, hey, I've totally lost, etc., etc. Because black should have played king takes b5, and we've gotten something like this. Something like the following line. I knew that this was losing. I was expecting this to happen. I knew this was losing because basically in these kind of situations where you have pawns on one side and kings sort of fighting it out, one king trying to defend against the other one from infiltrating, the aggressor, so in this situation black, effectively is going to win. White is going to have an incredibly hard time getting them out, because the black king can just outflank in some manner, and here's a good example of that. So yeah, this is just what happens. The black king takes the opposition. The white king has to give up defense of the pawn the black king takes, and yeah, this is just totally winning for black. So king b3, I played king b3 to stop the c pawn. I was expecting king takes b5, but my opponent was ever so gracious and, blundered the win back to me. I take the opposition, and then we just get this drawn position. So yeah, just a really instructive game. So we started out in the Tarrasch, my variation of the French that I'm looking to learn more about, playing on the white side. I was uncomfortable. I traded queens, got to an interesting ending. There was infiltration possibilities with subtleties on the queen side, but especially playing against black's bad light squared bishop. We had some interesting positions, several interesting positions where material was exactly equal, but white was winning like massively, like +3, +4. Really instructive moments there. And then finally, this idea of f5, this pawn break, that unfortunately I didn't see, and kind of in time pressure a little bit. But yeah, would have just been the way to press the advantage. And then we got into a subtle king and pawn ending that again was illustrative of you cannot be careless about your king and pawn endings. Like you're either right or you're wrong. Like there's no margin for error. It feels like it, or at least does to me. Hey, we're just moving kings and pawns, but yeah, if you're not careful, you just lose immediately. And also, if you're not careful as the person who's winning, you can just blow an advantage immediately, like my opponent did. So, some instructive moments for sure in this game. I hope you guys got something out of it. Please let me know in the comments, and we'll look forward to getting some more content here soon. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.